Hey, it's Robert Plank, just hanging out with the ducks at the canal, and I've got a quick question for you, and it's, where's your podcast? Why don't you have a podcast? What's holding you up? What has you scared and afraid? Is it stumbling over your words? Is it being imperfect? Well, I would venture a guess to say that if you don't have a podcast, which by the way is a way for you to speak out what you want to say, have it in a kind of an audio blog that people can dial up on their mobile devices and on your website, and they can subscribe, and now you have a new way of getting people on your list. Now you have something to give to your list, right? Free gifts, free content, free information, things to warm them up, diffuse their objections and their fears. But I would say that if you don't have a podcast, then it's maybe because you're afraid of the commitment. You tell yourself, oh, well, I don't know if I can find the time to make an episode every week. Well, who says it has to be every week? Who says you have to make more than a handful of episodes? Who says you can't create a mini-series podcast? Who says you can't make a podcast where you name it the same name as your existing book, or the same name as a book you want to come out with soon, and every episode just details a chapter or details a concept in that chapter? I mean, if you're afraid of, or you're starved for ideas, for things to talk about, well, I have a couple of suggestions for you. Suggestion number one, create an episode that's about 5 minutes or so of an audio recording where you're explaining your origin story, where you talk about yourself, you talk about what led you to where you're at, what sorts of struggles you came across with, what sorts of frustrations, what sort of mistakes you made along the way, saying, hey, I'm real, I'm human like you, but also those mistakes I made are in the past, I've learned from them, so therefore I'm still an authority on what I'm talking about. What if you made a second episode that explained just one single concept that applies to your niche, applies to your industry? So for example, I have a coaching client who is a doctor, and one of his episodes, there was like I'm near a farm, there's a security patrol. I thought he was eyeballing me with my phone out. It's okay though. So I was saying, I have this doctor client, and he has an episode on how to deal with depression during the holidays, or during your birthday, you get a year older, and just generally how to fix up your mental health by walking is the big secret. It's what I'm doing right now. It is kind of hot though. So I have another, not a coaching client, but a friend who's an internet marketer, and he has an episode that's all about this concept of getting in state, right? That sometimes we can be happy or we can be sad, but if you had a collection of 4 or 5 of those emotions, you can be in a state of focus or a state of excitement or a state of being energized. Check out those cows. So you don't have to necessarily stay on brand, so to speak, and make every episode of your podcast about something that exactly relates to the exact path to get someone to buy from you right now. You could have podcast episodes that are about all kinds of crazy random stuff, off the wall things that are new avenues, paths for people to find you and hop on your list. And what's really great about podcasting is that you can invite a guest on your show, and you can have a quick chat where you make them look good, where you ask them about their app, their website, their book, their course, their coaching offer, and you have a quick chit chat. And it's actually a lot less awkward than you think, because these people you're chatting with, they do it all day long. They've had conversations like this all the time. So if you're afraid of the commitment factor with podcasting, I mean, there's no rule at all that says you have to make more than a couple of podcast episodes. You can create 1 podcast episode a year. You can do it as often as you like, just like how you post on your blog, you post on Facebook, you post on Twitter, as often as you like. There's no set schedule. And you know what too? I mean, even Oprah Winfrey has a podcast, and if you found a podcast episode from Oprah Winfrey and she hadn't posted anything new in a year, does that make Oprah Winfrey's podcast episode any less important? Well, I don't think so. So get over that thinking that you need to have some sort of a commitment. And so if you're afraid of podcasting, maybe it's the technology side of things, right? Well, the good news is that technology today is so cheap and easy that just about anything you use to get started will work. And what I mean by that is there's a free online service called Zencastr. Zencastr. There's no E in it. There's only one E. There's no E at the end, right? Zencastr.com. And that is a free tool where you don't have to install anything. You literally go to your web browser, you go to Zencastr.com, you click record, and you can speak out your podcast episode. It can dub in music. If you want to have a guest on, you just give them the link to where you're recording, and somehow magically they can begin speaking into that as well, and you can hear each other through the computer, through the browser. It's amazing. And as far as the hardware, I mean, right now I'm just using my iPhone and some Bluetooth earbuds, but to record my podcast episode in my office, I started for years with what's called just a Logitech Clear Chat headset. You can go on Amazon, and the shortcut to get that is podcastcrusher.com/headset. That'll send you right to Amazon, where you can get that headset. It's a $25 headset. Get you started, put it on your ears, plug it in, start talking. And by the way, our course for the whole thing is podcastcrusher.com, where we show you everything. We show you how to get it set up. And to be honest, the setup is the hard part. And it's only hard because there are a couple of things to click and do and set up a plugin and submit to iTunes. But once it's set up, it's done. Once your podcast is set up, all you have to do to post something new is basically upload an audio file, make a new blog post, and there's a special box in that blog post where you put in your audio file, and there you go. Now you have a podcast, which is basically a blog with audio content. So if you're worried about the time commitment or remembering to post new episodes, don't worry about it. Post on your schedule. If you're worried about the technology, start small. Start with something easy. Start with something cheap or free. And if you ever outgrow that $25 Logitech headset, if you record a couple episodes and you say, all right, this is something I want to continue doing, then go back to Amazon and search Blue Yeti. That is about $100, but it's the same deal. It plugs right into your USB. You just speak right into it, and that is the next logical stepping stone to slowly get better equipment. And I think that's the key. Is start off with something just really bare bones cheap. Don't buy a bunch of equipment because that adds a new obstacle for you. Start with whatever is easy. I mean, if you had to start a podcast with your computer's built-in microphone, that's something. And so that way you're not creating this huge long checklist in front of yourself before you even create one episode. Create an episode and then slowly buy better equipment as you figure more things out. I think that's a lot more encouraging, and that way you can sort of even reward yourself for getting a few things accomplished, right? Get a few podcast episodes recorded, and as a reward, you buy some new fancy toys for yourself. So post on your own schedule, ramp up the equipment over time, and you know what? If you're worried about talking to people, if you're worried about asking for people to appear on your show, well, you're actually doing them a favor. And what's helped me is whenever I have a guest on, and I think I have 650 some podcast episodes, about 500 of those are interviews. Whenever I feel awkwardness, or whenever I feel like I don't know about this person, I just ask them things about themselves. Because usually if someone's annoyed with me as a podcast host, it's because I'm not asking them about their own stuff. And so that's really why they're there. So when you have a guest on your show, they're there to get some more attention on whatever their cause is, right? To get more focus back to their website URL or to their book. So just ask them about, why do you create this book? How did this help you? Or, you know, how does this information help others? What do you see people who don't have your book or who don't have your information, what problems are they having because they don't have your help? What mistakes do you see people making over and over again? And so it helps so many times to fall back on the template, to fall back on some of the usual questions, like, why did you get started? Can you give me a story or a case study about someone you've helped? If I know nothing about your book, about being more organized, what's something that I could pick up right now in 60 seconds that would help me? I interviewed a financial guy once, and I asked him about, well, what's kind of sort of low-hanging fruit? People are managing their money wrong. What's an easy thing? And he said, well, install this app called Mint that will allow you to track your finances, and that's the first step in making a change, is just seeing what's going on presently. So podcast guests are used to answering quick questions like that, and it's a good way to make a friend. I mean, think of all the podcast guests you could have had over the years. So I have some podcasts, like we have one called the Membership Site Podcast, where I just talk about different membership concepts, like adding a quiz to your membership site, adding drip content to your membership site. But we have another podcast called the VO Success Formula Podcast, where we teach voiceover artists how to make money on places like Fiverr and Upwork. And so I have guests on. One guy was an expert with audiobooks. One guy was an expert at audio editing and audio producing. So this guy, his clients or other voiceover artists. So we used our podcast as a way to show off our best members. Once our members graduate, so to speak, they get huge results from our course, then we say, all right, well, tell us about what makes you unique. Tell us about what you've done with our course, with our membership site. So there are no rules with podcasting. The rules are the ones that you make up to make sure that you get things done. So if you set a rule for yourself saying, I'll join podcastcrusher.com today, I'll get my podcast set up within the next 3 days, great. That's a rule that you set for yourself. And a rule I like to set for myself is when I record a podcast episode, I feel like I need to talk more than 10 minutes, because I feel like if an episode is 5 or 10 minutes, it doesn't really get to the fun stuff. But I also tell myself that once we get to maybe 15, 20 minutes or so into an episode, it's time to start winding down, because we've gotten to the real core meat of things, but we don't want to ramble on for too long. We don't want to talk for 2 hours about something, because people have lives to get back to, right? People listen to podcasts in their car, on their commute, and a walk, at the gym. So a lot of people are like, you know, when I flip through Netflix, there's 1,000 channels and nothing on. I flip through the Pandora, the Spotify, same old songs. Let me dial up something to kind of enrich myself, learn something. And podcasts are a great format for that. The growth of podcasts is slow but steady. It's never dropped. There are podcasts now built into smart speakers in homes. Think Amazon Echo, Alexa, Google Home. Podcasts built into all of that. In cars, so you think Tesla or how Ford has a big fancy screen, podcasts built in. So you're missing out on all the guests you could have had for your podcast. You're missing out on all the new listeners who are looking for ways to lose weight, trade in the stock market, build an online business, whatever it is that you teach. They're typing that into the Google Play Store, into SoundCloud, into Apple iTunes, into YouTube, and you could be in those search results if only you had a podcast. So the place to get your podcast figured out, set up online, recorded, actually done, is podcastcrusher.com. If you're thinking about a podcast, stop thinking about it, do it. And then think about the podcast that you had previously created, and then do all the fun things that having a podcast affords you. You can get guests on your show. Because you have guests on your show, you can then appear on their show to return the favor in a way. You could transcribe that podcast, turn it into a book, turn that into an audiobook, build your YouTube channel, create a whole follow-up sequence for your subscribers that maybe you're not emailing often to enough. Maybe you're not sure what to email to them other than, here, buy my stuff. Well, you'd be a real generous person if you said, hey, I'm coming out with a 20-minute episode in a couple of days. What would you like to know about? 2 days later, hey, I made the episode, here it is. 2 days later, hey, reminding you about this episode. And once they finally click, they say, whoa, this person recorded 20 minutes for free telling me how to get my finances in order, what I need to know about buying a drone, what I need to know about living to a nice, healthy old age. So you need to have a podcast, especially if you want to compete in this day and age of people's attention being so split, not necessarily checking email, not always hanging on Facebook for very long. Maybe you'll get a like on Instagram because you posted a photo, but where will that get you? So record a podcast, create a podcast. I'm Robert Plank from podcastcrusher.com. And let me know once you set it up where it's at so I can subscribe, give it a like, give it a review, whatever you want. I'll be proud of you. Make your podcast. Don't make it complicated though. Just make a podcast. Robert Plank, podcastcrusher.com. I'll see you in the members area. Bye now.